Imagine for a moment that your body is not a machine that breaks down, but a biological symphony that has simply drifted out of tune. We often look at the aging process as an inevitable descent into frailty, viewing our thinning muscles and aching joints as the tax we pay for the passage of time. But when we look at the human frame through the lens of evolutionary biology, we see something far more profound. The human gluteal complex, the architecture of our hips, is what truly defines our species. It is the engine of our upright posture, the shock absorber for our spine, and the very foundation of our independence. When the hips weaken, the world starts to feel smaller, the steps feel steeper, and the horizon seems to pull away. Yet, science tells us that the neuromuscular system remains remarkably plastic, even in our 7th or 8th decade. We are not just fixing a part, we are reclaiming the structural integrity of our being. Consider the sheer complexity of the gluteus maximus. It is not merely a cushion for sitting. It is the largest and arguably the most powerful muscle in the entire human body. From a purely mechanical perspective, it functions as the primary extensor of the hip, but its role goes so much deeper than simple movement. When we examine the skeletal structure of a 60-year-old, we often see a phenomenon where the pelvis begins to tilt forward, a result of decades of seated living. This anterior pelvic tilt places an incredible amount of shear force on the lower vertebrae. The gluteus maximus, when properly engaged, acts as a corrective counterweight. It pulls the pelvis back into a neutral alignment, acting as a biological anchor that secures the spine from below. Without this anchor, the muscles of the lower back are forced to perform a job they were never designed for, holding the body upright against the relentless pull of gravity. This is why back pain is so often a ghost, a symptom of the silent, sleeping engine in the hips. Biologically, as we age, we face a process called sarcopenia, the gradual loss of muscle mass. But more specifically, we lose our type 2 fast-twitch muscle fibers, the ones responsible for power and stability, at a rate much faster than our endurance fibers. The glutes are densely packed with these fibers. When they begin to quiet down, the metabolic cost is staggering. The glutes are a massive glucose sink. They help regulate our blood sugar and maintain our basal metabolic rate. Thus, a weak hip isn't just a physical hurdle. It is a metabolic one. The atrophy of the glutes changes the very way we interact with our environment. We start to short step, losing the beautiful long stride of our youth. This isn't just about walking. It is about the physics of the human gait. Every time your heel hits the ground, a force equivalent to several times your body weight travels up your leg. In a healthy, tuned body, the glutes absorb that energy, recycling it into the next step. In a body where the gluteal bridge is collapsed, that energy vibrates through the knee, travels into the hip joint, and eventually rattles the delicate disc of the spine. To understand the gluteus maximus is to understand the history of human movement. We are the only primates with such highly developed buttocks, a feature that allowed our ancestors to run long distances and survive. In the modern world, we have muted this evolutionary masterpiece. When you reach the age of 60, your nervous system has likely spent 40 years forgetting how to talk to these muscles. This is what we call gluteal amnesia. The neural pathways are still there. The wires are intact, but the signal has become faint, like a radio station fading as you drive further into the mountains. The scientific beauty of hip rehabilitation lies in the fact that we can turn that signal back up. We do this not through brute force, but through specific, targeted recruitment. When we perform a movement like the glute bridge, we aren't just lifting our hips. We are reestablishing a conversation between the motor cortex of the brain and the muscle spindles. We are telling the brain, this muscle is still relevant. This muscle is still needed. The cellular response to this renewed attention is fascinating. When we load the muscle, even with just the weight of our own limbs, we trigger the release of myokines, small signaling proteins that have anti-inflammatory effects throughout the entire body. These myokines are sometimes called hope molecules because of their positive impact on brain health and mood. So, as you work to strengthen hips, you are effectively bathing your system in a natural, health-promoting pharmacy. Furthermore, we must look at the fascia, the connective tissue that wraps around our muscles like a web. Over time, in the absence of movement, this fascia becomes brittle and sticky. By engaging in purposeful gluteal work, we hydrate this tissue, restoring the glide to our stride. It is a process of internal lubrication. Think of the hip joint itself, a ball and socket designed for incredible ranges of motion. It is surrounded by a capsule of ligaments and a suite of smaller muscles like the gluteus medius and minimus. These smaller players are the steering mechanism. If the gluteus maximus is the engine, the medius is the alignment. In the 60-plus demographic, weakness in the gluteus medius often leads to a Trendelenburg gait, where the hip drops with every step. This creates a chain reaction of instability. By focusing on the scientific precision of lateral movements and rotations, we don't just get stronger, we get more stable. We are building a fortress around the hip joint, protecting the femoral head and reducing the wear and tear on the cartilage. This is the difference between surviving your later years and thriving in them. It is the difference between feeling your age in every bone and feeling the lightness of a body that is supported by its own natural strength. We often mistake exercise for something we do to look a certain way. But at this stage of life, exercise is an act of biological stewardship. It is the maintenance of the vessel. When we engage the glutes, we are also engaging the pelvic floor, creating a core stability that supports our internal organs and our respiratory system. A strong hip allows for a deeper breath because it provides a stable base for the diaphragm to work against. Everything is connected. The scientific reality is that your body is constantly listening to the demands you place upon it. If you tell it that you only need to sit, it will prune away the unnecessary muscle and bone. But if you tell it, through these 5 movements, that you intend to stand tall, to walk far, and to move with grace, the body responds with a miraculous surge of adaptation. It begins to deposit minerals into bone density of the hip neck. It weaves new protein strands into muscle fibers, and it sharpens the neural timing of your movements. You're not just doing glute moves. You're performing a biological intervention that resets your physiological clock, allowing you to move through the world not with the hesitation of the frail, but with the quiet confidence of the strong. The transition from the biological anchor into the neurology of awareness is perhaps the most transformative phase of this journey. We often assume that if a muscle is physically present, it must be functioning, but the nervous system is a pragmatist. It follows the law of use it or lose it with ruthless efficiency. For many individuals over 60, the physical connection between the motor cortex, the part of the brain that plans movement, and the gluteal muscles has become a cold line. The wires are still in the walls, but the electricity hasn't been switched on in years. This is not a failure of the muscle itself, but a lapse in neurological communication. To fix this, we must move beyond the no pain, no gain mentality and enter the realm of neuroplasticity, where the goal is not to lift heavy, but to feel deeply. When you sit for extended periods, the brain receives a constant stream of sensory data telling it that the glutes are serving as a cushion, not a motor. Eventually, the brain begins to categorize these muscles as dormant. In scientific terms, this leads to an over-reliance on the hamstrings and lower back to perform hip extension, a compensation pattern that is the primary architect of chronic pain. Reversing this requires what we call conscious recruitment. Before you even move a limb, you must learn to find the muscle. It begins with thought, a mental pulse sent down the spine. This is the foundation of the mind-muscle connection. By focusing your internal gaze on the glutes during a simple isometric contraction, you are essentially clearing the static off that radio frequency. You are telling the nervous system to reprioritize this pathway. This neurological reawakening is supported by the concept of proprioception, our body's ability to sense its position in space. As we age, our proprioceptive sensors in the joints can become less sensitive. By performing slow, deliberate gluteal activations, we are recalibrating these sensors. We are teaching the brain where the pelvis ends and the legs begin. This creates a proprioceptive map that is sharp and high definition. When your map is clear, your balance improves instantly. You no longer have to think about staying upright because the glutes are automatically firing in response to every subtle shift in your center of gravity. This is a young feeling we chase, not necessarily the absence of birthdays, but the presence of effortless, automatic stability. As this neurological bridge strengthens, the muscle fibers themselves begin to change. Even before you see a physical change in the mirror, the recruitment threshold drops. This means it takes less effort for your brain to turn the muscles on. Initially, you might have to concentrate intensely just to squeeze your glutes, but within weeks, they start participating in your daily life again. They wake up when you stand up from a chair. They engage when you climb a flight of stairs. This is a true meaning of fixing it fast. We aren't waiting for months of hypertrophy, muscle growth. We are enjoying the immediate benefits of neurological efficiency. You are essentially upgrading the software of your movement patterns, allowing the hardware of your body to operate as it was designed, as a fluid, integrated, and resilient whole. As we move deeper into this biological lecture, we must address the structural bridge between our lower and upper halves, the pelvis. To understand the pelvic tilt and spinal synergy is to understand why so many people over 60 suffer from mysterious, nagging back pain that never seems to resolve with rest. The spine does not exist in a vacuum. It is a mass stepped into the base of the pelvis. If that base is tilted, the mass cannot stand straight. In a sedentary world, our hip flexors, the muscles of the front of the thigh, become chronically shortened and tight. Because these muscles originate on the lumbar spine, they act like tight cables, pulling the lower back forward and downward into what we call an anterior pelvic tilt. This creates a sharp, compressed arch in the small of the back, pinching the delicate facet joints and narrowing the space where nerves exit the spinal column. It is a mechanical disaster. The beauty of the 5 glute movements we are discussing lies in their ability to act as a mechanical reset. The glutes and the hamstrings are the functional antagonists to those tight hip flexors. When you strengthen the glutes, you are effectively creating a downward pull on the back of the pelvis. This tension acts as a corrective counter-rotation, tilting the pelvis back into a neutral, level position. This is a spinal synergy. The moment the pelvis levels out, the lumbar spine is suddenly gifted with space. The compression vanishes. The discs are allowed to rehydrate, and the muscles of the lower back, which have been screaming in a state of constant overwork, can finally let go. We often think of core strength as doing sit-ups, but for the 60-plus body, the most profound core strength comes from the hips. A strong gluteal complex provides a stable foundation that prevents the spine from leaking energy or buckling under load. When you walk, a stable pelvis ensures that the force of each step is absorbed by muscle rather than being transmitted directly into the vertebrae. We are talking about a philosophical shift in how we view the body. We are moving from a model of wear and tear to a model of tension and integrity. By mastering the pelvic tilt through gluteal engagement, you aren't just exercising. You're performing a daily decompression of your own spine, ensuring that your structural mass remains upright and resilient for the decades to come. To truly master the art of feeling young again, we must look at a brilliant biological cheat code known as functional reciprocity, or more technically, reciprocal inhibition. This is a fundamental law of human kinesiology. When one muscle on one side of a joint contracts, the nervous system automatically sends a signal to a muscle on the opposite side to relax. It is the body's way of preventing us from fighting ourselves. In the aging body, we often feel tight. We stretch and we pull, but the tightness remains. This is because that tightness is often neurological, not just physical. If your hip flexors are constantly on, your glutes are forced to stay off. By engaging in these 5 glute moves, we aren't just building muscle. We are using the glutes to force the front of the hips to let go. When you drive your heel down and squeeze the glute, the brain reflexively shuts down the tension in the psoas and iliacus. It is like releasing a handbrake that you've been driving with for 20 years. This reciprocity creates a profound sense of opening. Suddenly, your leg can swing back further during a walk. Your stride becomes longer and more fluid without any extra effort. We are essentially using the strength of the posterior to cure the stiffness of the anterior. It is a thoughtful, scientific approach to flexibility, moving away from the old-fashioned stretch until it hurts method and moving toward a strengthen to release philosophy. This ensures that the mobility you gain is stable and supported rather than loose and vulnerable. By understanding this reciprocal relationship, we stop seeing our bodies as a collection of stiff parts and start seeing them as a balanced system of pulleys. Every time you consciously fire your glutes, you are sending a message of safety to your hip flexors. You are telling your nervous system that it no longer needs to guard the front of the joint with tension because the back of the joint is finally doing its job. This internal balance is a hallmark of a healthy, youthful gait, a body that moves with harmony rather than friction. Finally, we arrive at the most critical aspect of our journey, the velocity of vitality. In the scientific study of aging, there is one metric that stands above almost all others as a predictor of long-term health and independence, and that is gait speed. How fast and confidently you move from point A to point B. As we cross the threshold of 60, the nature of our muscle loss isn't just about size. It is about speed. We lose our power, the ability to generate force quickly, much faster than we lose our raw strength. This loss of velocity is what makes the world feel dangerous, as the ability to catch oneself during a trip or to step quickly off a curb begins to diminish. The glutes are the primary engines of power. While the quads help us stand, the glutes are what propel us forward and, more importantly, what stabilizes us during single-leg stance, that fraction of a second when one foot is in the air during a step. By performing these 5 moves, particularly those that challenge lateral stability and hinge speed, we are training the nervous system to react with precision. We are building functional velocity. This isn't about running a marathon. It's about having the snap in your hips to adjust your balance instantly. When we look at the statistics of falls in the 60-plus population, the culprit is rarely a lack of leg strength in a general sense. It is a lack of lateral hip stability. The gluteus medius acts as a biological gyroscope. If it is weak, the pelvis wobbles, the center of gravity shifts, and the risk of a fall skyrockets. By strengthening this side glute, we create a wide, stable base. We are essentially lowering our center of gravity and widening our biological foundation. Science shows that even a small increase in hip power can drastically reduce the mechanical cost of walking, meaning you can walk further and faster with less fatigue. This is where the philosophy of health meets the hard reality of biology. When you feel fast on your feet, your psychology changes. You stop looking at the ground when you walk. Your chin comes up, your shoulders relax, and you re-engage with the world around you. You move from a defensive posture, one of guarding and fear, to an offensive posture, one of exploration and confidence. This velocity of vitality is the ultimate reward for our scientific curiosity. It is the proof that the body, even at 60, 70, or 80, is not a declining asset, but a living, breathing, adapting masterpiece that responds to the right stimulus with renewed life.